Chapter 601, Healing. The room was not a big one. The table, bed, and all the other furniture was covered in a layer of dust. Clearly, no one had been staying in this room for a long time. Once Su Ming cleaned it up, he sat down on the bed and looked at the dark sky outside the window. His eyes began to sparkle. Gradually, a hint of a smile appeared at the corners of his lips. The power of the world here is indeed thick. Su Ming had noticed this when he was going up the mountain. As he sat on the bed, the feeling he gained from the presence all around him became even clearer. As expected of the place where a sect is located. There were 3 reasons why Su Ming came to Evil Spirit Sect. One of them was to resolve the crisis for Ugly Little Thing's family. The second was to help her find the cause for her brother's death. And the third was so that Su Ming could recover his cultivation base as quickly as possible. The thick presence here was incredibly helpful towards helping him recover. But the grudge is too deep. Su Ming frowned. The power of the world here might be thick, but the grudge contained within it was similarly thick. If he stayed here for a long period of time, his personality would definitely be affected. He remained in pensive silence for a time, then his gaze fell on the gourd, and he saw that the ghost face formed from the black smoke was also looking at him, smiling ferociously. It thought that Su Ming could not see it. After all, he was merely a mortal in its eyes. Su Ming did not bother himself with that ghost face. He opened the gourd, and an even thicker wave of grudge instantly came crashing into his face. It instantaneously filled the entire room, causing shrill screams to sound in Su Ming's ears. After a moment, his face turned dark and sinister. He poured out a medicinal core from the gourd, which was purplish black. The thick grudge within it was terrifying. Yet strangely, when he placed the medicinal core to his nose to sniff it, a medicinal fragrance wafted into his nostrils, and it turned into a refreshing feeling. Su Ming shook the gourd slightly, and found that there were about 100-something medicinal cores inside it. He closed his eyes and only opened them again after a long moment. A pensive look appeared in his eyes. This is a very good supplement. If a mortal takes it, they will be able to strengthen their bodies. They will be filled with blood. Just what is this Jiao Chong thinking about? A glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes and he swallowed the core. He was familiar with medicinal herbs since he was young, and had ample experience when it came to creating medicinal pills. With just one sniff, he could tell the general effects of this medicinal core. Since he could not tell what was going on with that Jiao Chong, he decided to just swallow one of the cores. The medicine turned into a wave of warmth that flowed through Su Ming's entire body. After a moment, a brilliant glow shone in his eyes. He brought out a few more pills and swallowed them one by one. His cultivation base recovered a bit more after he swallowed those medicinal cores. When it turned dark outside, Su Ming lay on his bed, circulating his cultivation base within his body as he pretended to sleep. When midnight arrived and everything was silent outside, the cold air in his room suddenly turned thicker. A black shadow floated out from the wall by his side. The ghost-like figure floated to Su Ming's bed, as if he was observing him. Soon after, ghosts like these floated out from all the walls in the room. Before long, there were about a dozen of them in Su Ming's room. They floated around while going in and out of the room, but they did not make a single sound. With his eyes narrowed, Su Ming lay on his bed and watched this scene. If he was really a child, then he would definitely be so terrified that he would be shivering when he saw this sight. However, he was Su Ming. He only narrowed his eyes and looked at them coldly. These were indeed ghosts, but judging by their looks, they had been here for a long time. They continued wandering about the room, and no one could say what they were doing. This scene lasted for several hours. When the sky started becoming brighter, all the drifting and wandering ghosts suddenly stopped moving and looked towards Su Ming simultaneously. A murderous look appeared in their eyes. When they looked at him, their gazes seemed to have gained corporeal form. Almost at the instant they looked at Su Ming, they abruptly moved and charged towards him. A glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes. He chose not to move and simply allowed the ghosts to surround him. Once they did so, he saw all of them sucking in a breath in his direction. With it, Su Ming could clearly feel a hint of his life force being absorbed. A freezing glare flashed in his eyes. The ghosts slowly retreated once they absorbed a hint of his life force. They returned to the walls around him and disappeared. The sky turned bright at that moment. This room is very interesting. Su Ming opened his eyes and looked at the walls around him with slightly cold eyes. He averted his gaze and picked up the gourd on the ground, then continued to swallow the medicinal cores. Time passed. In the blink of an eye, 10 days went by. During them, Su Ming did not get out of the house, neither did Zhao Chong send any word to him. Everything remained silent. However, when night came, the ghosts would appear. Every single day before morning, they would absorb his life force and leave. Thankfully, they would only absorb a small wisp, and it was not much of a problem to Su Ming. Besides, when he ate the medicinal cores, he could replenish his life force. Su Ming spent most of his time in absorbing the power of the world in this place and used it to recover his injuries. On this day, he finished eating all the medicinal cores. He cast a glance at the gourd and picked it up once he stood up. When he stepped out of his room, he pushed open the door to his house for the first time and walked into the courtyard. It was dusk. The sky was filled with a layer of crimson. The remaining rays of light from the sun scattered on the ground, and it looked incredibly beautiful. With the gourd in hand, Su Ming went to Zhao Chong's house and wrapped his fist in his palm with a respectful expression on his face. "Greetings, Master. I've already finished all the medicinal cores." To Su Ming, these medicinal cores were still marginally useful. They could make him recover faster. It might not be much, but if he could get free medicinal cores, he would naturally not let it pass. Deathly silence filled Zhao Chong's house. The hoarse voice only appeared slowly after a moment. "You finished them? There were 100 soul-nurturing cores, and you finished all of them in 10 days? Didn't I tell you to only take 1 per day?" For the first time, a hint of emotion could be heard within that voice. "My body felt warm and really comfortable once I ate those medicinal cores, so I didn't manage to control myself and ate more," Su Ming said. He did not know what Zhao Chong was thinking at that moment. After a period of silence, another wave of fog flew out from the house and turned into a dried-up arm before Su Ming. It swiftly grabbed his right hand. Su Ming smiled coldly in his heart, but his face was pale. He allowed his right hand to be held by that arm and sensed a wave of cold air rushing into his body, swimming through his body once before leaving. "There are 300 here. Don't you dare eat them too quickly." Once the cold air went away, the black fog also retreated, and 3 gourds flew out from the house before falling by Su Ming's feet. "Thank you, Master." Su Ming picked up the 3 gourds on the ground and went back to his house, no longer bothering himself with that Zhao Chong. This person definitely has ulterior motives. If that's the case, I'll just get what I can from him. Once Su Ming returned to his house, he sat down in his room and brought out one of the medicinal cores to inspect it after he opened the gourd. Then he swallowed it. Time gradually trickled by, and 20 days went by. Su Ming had been in Evil Spirit Sect for a whole month now. During this time, the rate of his recovery far surpassed what he had managed outside. His cultivation base had recovered by about 15% as he took in those medicinal cores and absorbed the power of the world in secret. On this day, he finished the medicinal cores once again. Su Ming gave a lazy stretch and stood up, then grabbed the 3 gourds before going to Zhao Chong's gate once again. "Master, I finished the medicinal cores again." This time, Zhao Chong's house remained silent for a much longer period of time compared to the last time. When he eventually spoke, there was a hint of disbelief within the hoarse voice. "There were 300 in there." "That's right." Su Ming nodded. "How many do you eat per day?" Zhao Chong's voice became much darker than before. "Sometimes I don't take any. Sometimes I take about a dozen per day. My record was 100 per day," Su Ming reported honestly. Zhao Chong's house fell silent once again. After a long time, a cold harumph traveled out. "Since you like these medicinal cores, no matter how much you want, I will let you have them." When those words were spoken, a huge gourd about half a man's height abruptly flew out from the open door to the house and fell with a bang before Su Ming. "There are 2,000 cores here. If you can, finish them within a month." Su Ming grinned, then dragged the gourd back to his room and closed the door. Once he inspected it, he started going through his life of recovering his cultivation base again. But he was smiling coldly in his heart. Zhao Chong was really good at holding it in regarding this. On one hand, it was because he had not noticed the waves of power from his cultivation base, and on the other hand, it also let Su Ming see that whatever it was that he was plotting for, it was something of incredible scale. All right, let's see just where this person's limits lie. Time passed as usual, and in the blink of an eye, another month was over. Master, I finished the medicinal cause. Su Ming stood at the same spot in the courtyard before Zhao Chong's house. Before him was the empty giant gourd. He even tapped it, and an empty sound rang from within. Zhao Chong's house remained silent. When the time taken for almost half of an incense stick to burn went by, 3 huge gourds flew out from inside the house, and each of them contained about 2,000 pills. They landed before Su Ming. This time, this Zhao Chong did not even seem to want to speak. Another month later. Master, I finished them again. Another month later. Master, do you have any more? This lasted up to half a year. During it, Su Ming would take a large amount of medicinal cores from Zhao Chong every month. The number of pills he took already numbered to tens of thousands, and Su Ming was taking more and more in each go. His speed of recovery combined with the power of the world in this place had allowed him to recover almost 4/10 of his cultivation base during these past 6 months. This sort of recovery had made Su Ming see hope, but the effects of the medicinal core were practically insignificant by then. On this day, Su Ming came to Zhao Chong's house once again and said these words, "Master, could you give me another type of medicinal core?" Chapter 602, Fang. Time passed swiftly. Su Ming had already stayed in Evil Spirit Sect for 8 months. With the large amount of medicinal cores and the power of the world in this place, his cultivation base had finally recovered to half of what it was before. Yet the more he recovered, the slower his pace of recovery grew. He had already changed the medicinal cores from Zhao Chong thrice, and he would take in large amounts of those each time. When he went to take more medicine 3 days ago, Zhao Chong had told him, with a hint of resignation in his voice, that he had temporarily ran out of medicinal cores. Su Ming still looked like he was only about 12 or 13 years old. He might have grown a little, but there wasn't much change in him. In fact, Su Ming even had a feeling that his body had reverted to the past and he could no longer return to how he used to look. This meant that he could only slowly grow up as destiny. To others, no power from any sort of cultivation base could be detected in him. Only those who had reached great completion in the Berserker Soul Realm would be able to discover anything off about him. However, there was only one person who was at the equivalent to the great completion in the Berserker Soul Realm defending Evil Spirit Sect, and most of the time he was in isolation. He would completely ignore what was going on. That was why no one could tell just what was Su Ming's level of cultivation. Zhao Chong was naturally the same, but he had begun to grow suspicious. The medicinal cores he had spent on Su Ming during these past 8 months had almost spent all his money, making his heart clench in so much pain that he had wanted to kill Su Ming several times out of rage. All the disciples he met in the past were never as strange as this one. He had checked multiple times to be certain that Su Ming had indeed eaten those pills and had even made sure that he was just a mortal. He had even used an enchanted treasure to make sure that the child was not hiding any sort of cultivation base. Yet in the end, the answer he obtained revealed absolutely nothing about Su Ming possessing any sort of cultivation base. No matter what, he was just a teenager that had a slightly bigger appetite. Or else it would be incredibly difficult for him to continue giving all those pills to him, when it made his heart ache so badly. Several days ago, he was finally running out of the medicinal cores he could give away. Those he had left were ones he could not bear to use on Su Ming. That was why he could only tell the child with a resigned tone that he was temporarily out of medicinal cores. But he was not completely mortified by this. He had been frequently observing Su Ming during the past 8 months, and while his heart ached at his losses, he also had high expectations based on just how much the child took in. As for Su Ming, the recovery of his cultivation base over the past 8 months had caused his divine sense to be much sharper than when he just arrived. He might not have left the courtyard, but he had scanned everything within the outer sect in Evil Spirit Sect in secret, and he was very familiar with it. Su Ming would also not let Zhao Chong slide. However, he could only see a thick layer of fog within the man's room. There was a bloodiness to that fog, and he could vaguely see a person sitting still in it. Zhao Chong's level of cultivation was also rather strange to Su Ming. He seemed to only be at the equivalent of the awakening realm, but when he took a closer look, he found a trace of the waves of power belonging to Berserker Soul Realm. Besides that, he had found nothing strange about him during these 8 months. Zhao Chong just repeatedly gave him large amounts of medicinal cores. If Su Ming had been without them, he would have taken a much longer time to recover the power he had when all his bones had turned into berserker bones. That was why he chose not to attack when it came to Zhao Chong. He wanted to see what the other would do once Su Ming finished all his medicinal cores and reached the man's breaking point. 8.5 months since Su Ming arrived in Evil Spirit Sect, winter came and snow fell from the sky without stop, making the land seem as if it was wrapped in a silvery white robe. Even the moonlight looked as if it was shining with a silver light. The entire mountain was dressed in a white winter coat, and even the black halls were the same. The perfect combination between the black and white shades could cause people to have the feeling that they were looking at an ink wash painting when they looked at this scene. The black smoke that rose up into the sky looked as if it was an eternal existence that would never change in this ink wash painting. On this day during midnight, Su Ming looked at the snow outside his window. He remembered being with Ugly Little Thing's family during winter last year. "Big brother, can we make a snowman together?" "Big brother, you bully. You ruined the snowman." "Big brother, why is there snow? I asked Pa and Ma before, they don't know about it." A smile appeared at the corners of Su Ming's lips. There were an innumerable amount of ghosts floating about in his room, causing that smile on his face to be completely out of place with his surroundings. Su Ming was already used to the ghosts' presence. In fact, he had even noticed that all the ghosts that came were never the same 2 nights in a row, as they moved in and out of the room. When most of Su Ming's divine sense recovered, he even saw that the ghosts did not just exist in his room. The entire outer sect, besides a few spots, was visited by these ghosts. As Su Ming looked at the snow outside, a freezing glare suddenly shone in his eyes. He let out a cold harumph in his heart and closed his eyes, falling back on his bed, but even though his eyes were shut, he could still sense everything around him with his divine sense. He saw the door to his house opening without a sound. When a gust of cold wind blew in the courtyard, a person walked in. He was surrounded by black fog and his face could not be seen clearly, but as he walked in, the ghosts in the room froze for a moment before they slowly scattered and left. The person went to Su Ming's bed and looked at him, who looked as if he was sleeping, since he had his eyes closed. The eyes in the black fog shone with a dark light. "You little brat, it's time for you to repay me for eating so many of my medicinal cores." Naturally, that person was Zhao Chong. With a swing of his arm, a layer of black fog instantly swept up Su Ming and left with him back to Zhao Chong's house. A freezing glare was hidden behind Su Ming's closed eyes. The man had been unable to discover his divine sense, and Su Ming watched himself being taken into the person's room before Zhao Chong brought him to a rune that was hidden in the black fog in the room. As the rune shone, Su Ming and Zhao Chong appeared within a black mountain cave. From the waves of force from the relocation, Su Ming could tell that they had not relocated too far away. They should still be within Evil Spirit Sect's territory. It might be dark all around, but when Zhao Chong flicked his wrist, dark light immediately illuminated the cave. This was a cast cave, and there were hundreds of dried-up corpses around them. All of their mouths wide open, their eyes lifeless. They only had their skin and bones left, none of them retaining any traces of their flesh or life. All of the corpses looked different, but their poses were the same. They were all sitting down cross-legged. "You little brat, you're about to meet your older brother now." Zhao Chong was clearly resentful over the fact that Su Ming had taken great amounts of medicinal cores over the past 8 months. Once he cursed him, he no longer bothered himself with the child and instead sat down cross-legged on the ground. When he formed a seal with his hands, all the fog around his body immediately tumbled back inside him, which made him reveal his face for the first time. He was a middle-aged man with a face so pale it gave him an incredibly feeble look. Once Su Ming saw his appearance with his divine sense, his heart lurched. That face was incredibly similar to that of Ugly Little Thing's father. If their ages were not the same, they would have looked like father and son. Chapter 603, Senior, please spare me. Chen Shi. At the moment Su Ming saw Zhao Chong's appearance with his divine sense, the first thing that popped up into his head was this person's identity. The man might look like ugly little thing's big brother, but Su Ming was certain that Zhao Chong was currently occupying it. I see, it's possession. The freezing glare in Su Ming's eyes was hidden away because they were closed. He had formulated his guesses earlier, but had overlooked possession, because there was something in this matter that did not make sense. Zhao Chong was a nascent soul cultivator among the immortals, and that meant he was equivalent to those in the initial stage of the Berserker soul realm. This sort of person would only choose possession when they were gravely injured. Moreover, if they chose to possess a mortal, then their power would be greatly affected, and these people would usually choose not to possess others because of that. But this Zhao Chong was apparently not the case. Su Ming swept his divine sense through the cast cave, and the dried-up corpses with the same expression and actions all around him instantly made a thought appear in his head. Could it be that it's related to his cultivation method? The corpses around were clearly Zhao Chong's disciples. Su Ming could already imagine these people consuming the medicinal cores Zhao Chong gave them every single day when they were brought to be his disciples. Once they had taken a certain amount, they would be killed, and then all of them would eventually end up here as a dried-up corpse. Ugly Little Thing's older brother was the last person Zhao Chong had possessed. Su Ming was the person who was about to take his place. Zhao Chong had mentioned a time limit of a year before, so he must have wanted me to take one of those medicinal cores every single day for a year. But now, it has only been 8 months and he chose to take action. By how aggravated he is, it would seem like he harbors a deep grudge against me. Su Ming laughed coldly in his heart. Naturally, he knew exactly what made Zhao Chong act this way. After all, Su Ming had practically emptied out the man's stock, and had even almost made Zhao Chong's heart shatter in pain over his loss. It would also seem like Zhao Chong could not find it in himself to give up on this, which made it seem that he was caught in a bind. This then turned into a situation where as long as Su Ming stretched out his hand, the medicinal cores would arrive on his palm, right until Zhao Chong's pockets were completely emptied. Then, in his rage, he decided to act earlier. Su Ming could already imagine the grievance Zhao Chong harbored and the gloom he felt. Su Ming was not in a hurry to attack. He started sizing up Zhao Chong with his divine sense, and once he scanned this middle-aged man's body, he noticed something strange. If this person's body truly came from Chen Shi, then he should look like he was in his 20s, but his body now looked like that of a middle-aged man. It should be a diabolical cultivation method. Once he possesses a body, he will start absorbing its flesh and essence. Su Ming sent his divine sense sweeping through all the dried-up corpses in the area. He will also absorb the possessed's life force and his soul. Once he finishes absorbing everything, the body will turn into a dried-up corpse. This isn't possession, this is cannibalism. Su Ming focused his divine sense on Zhao Chong. At that moment, the body possessed by Zhao Chong suddenly started trembling, and once he opened his mouth, a layer of green fog swiftly flew out. An indistinct figure, made entirely of fog, gradually floated towards Su Ming. As it tumbled about, Su Ming could vaguely tell that this was a nascent soul. The nascent soul's eyes shone with a fierce glare when it looked at Su Ming. "You little brat, I'd rather devour you first than absorb Chen Shi's flesh and essence. How dare you eat so many of my medicinal cores? Damn you! I went through a lot to get those medicinal cores, they came from my blood, sweat, and tears. You sure ate them happily enough, huh? Today I'll make you pay back several-fold for how much you ate." Zhao Chong's anger had been accumulating for the past 8 months, and the grudge he harbored towards Su Ming was incredibly great. As he roared, his nascent soul rushed forward and closed in on Su Ming. When he approached him, a ferocious smile appeared on the nascent soul's lips. He was practically seeing himself taking over Su Ming's body once he lunged at him. Then, he would absorb his flesh and essence and devour his soul. He could already see himself absorbing all the nourishment that had been provided to this body by the medicinal cores the child had eaten during the past 8 months. Ever since Zhao Chong became a sect elder in Evil Spirit Sect, he had taken in countless disciples, and all of them could not escape from his palm. But similarly, none of them had eaten as much as Su Ming while making him so utterly mortified by the amount he took. In fact, he could still occasionally hear those words that had nearly made him cough up blood every single month over the past 8 months. Master, I ran out of medicine. Master, I finished them. Master, I finished them again. Could you give me more this time? Master, could you give me another type of medicinal core? The one I was taking no longer gives me any kind of feeling. Master, can't you change it? Zhao Chong shook his head to clear his mind, then turned into a dark ray of light that charged towards the center of Su Ming's brows. He grinned ferociously, feeling extremely invigorated. This was a joy from being on the verge of breaking free from the torture he had to endure for the past 8 months. During them, and especially in the last few months, he had even wondered whether he had owed this person something in his previous life, because how could he have received such a bizarre person as his disciple? Let's see you eating more, you jerk. Zhao Chong growled. At the instant his nascent soul touched the center of Su Ming's brows, he rushed into his body. His ferocious laughter reverberated in the host's soul, and Su Ming opened his eyes. There was a cold glare within them, but his expression was calm. In this world, there was nothing else that was less terrifying than possession to Su Ming. Unless the person who was possessing him had a will that was stronger than his, which had been refined into an imperishable will after going through endless cycles of reincarnations in the undying and imperishable world, then all people attempting possession on him were just inviting disaster to themselves. Clearly, it was impossible for this Zhao Chong to possess that sort of will. At the instant his nascent soul rushed into Su Ming's body, Su Ming lifted his right hand and tapped a few spots on his body in succession. Every single time his finger fell, it would look as if he had placed a seal on his own body. After several taps, his body turned into an inescapable cage for Zhao Chong, but the man was completely unaware of it at that moment. He was still immersed in his own joy as he rushed straight towards Su Ming's Dantian region after he entered his body. This was his habit. Every single time he possessed his disciple, he would not devour their souls straight away. He would instead choose to suppress them, then absorb their flesh and blood, and take over their Dantian region so that he could control them as if he was controlling his own body. Then, he would slowly enjoy his meal. Usually, he would need to take a full year to devour a person, and while the process was slow, it was something he enjoyed immensely. At that moment, he was merely acting according to habit by charging towards Su Ming's Dantian region. This little brat has indeed been eating a lot of my stuff over the past 8 months. Even the color of his bones has already changed, and his flesh as well as his blood also feels slightly different. Ha, it's your fault for eating so much, now it's all mine. It was unfortunate for Zhao Chong that he had not reached the bone sacrifice realm before he was made to change his body by those in evil spirit sect and was forced to practice the evil cultivation methods. He might have formed his nascent soul, but his knowledge regarding berserker bones was incomplete. Besides, Su Ming had all his bones turned into berserker bones. If his spine had been the only thing turned, then Zhao Chong would naturally have immediately noticed it. In his glee, Zhao Chong did not even notice that Su Ming had sealed all the exits in his body. He was still acting on habit and charging towards Su Ming's Dantian region, and he was getting closer, and closer still. He could already imagine it at Dantian region would be filled with sweetness, and after going through the nourishment provided by the medicinal cores, a large amount of essence would definitely have gathered there. That Dantian region would also be empty, just waiting for him, the only spiritual entity around, to go and devour it. In the past, every single one of his encounters were the same. However, this time, Zhao Chong charged forward with anticipation brimming in him, but when he arrived before Su Ming's Dantian region, he was left stunned. He found himself completely dumbfounded, and his jaw went slack in shock. Unlike what he imagined, Su Ming's Dantian region was not filled to the brim with essence that had accumulated over the past 8 months. There was only a gigantic nascent soul sitting cross-legged there, and he was much larger than Zhao Chong's own nascent soul. Perhaps it could no longer be called a nascent soul. This was Su Ming's nascent divinity. At that moment, Su Ming's nascent divinity had his eyes opened and was looking at Zhao Chong's nascent soul calmly. After recovering from his shock, Zhao Chong suddenly let out a piercing shriek. He shuddered, and as he screamed, he quickly retreated, almost disintegrating in fright. Whatever he thought, he had never expected that the disciple he originally thought was prey would actually be a monster. It was especially so when he saw the divine flow of power within that nascent soul. This was clearly a nascent divinity. Nascent divinity. His at least at nascent divinity. Damn it, how could this happen? No wonder he took so many medicinal cores. How could this happen? He's definitely not Chen Diaxi's little brother. At that moment, Zhao Chong's mind was a mess. Terror filled his entire nascent soul. His mind went blank, and the only thought he had at that moment was to rush out of Su Ming's body. He even had a feeling that he had just jumped straight into a trap. When he remembered just how pleased he had been and what he had done, he felt like crying. It was like the creature he originally thought was just a harmless little sheep waiting to be devoured had suddenly turned into an ancient, ferocious beast the instant he opened his mouth to devour it while feeling all smug about it. Damn it, this monster must be practicing a cultivation method that is similar to mine. He wants to devour me. The more Zhao Chong thought about it, the more he trembled in fear. Right at the instant he wanted to rush out of Su Ming's body, a bang went off in his head, and he was bounced off. Then, to his shock, he discovered that Su Ming's body had turned into a cage, and he could not leave. He heard a cold harumph reverberating in his head. Is my body a place where you can come and go as you please? Su Ming's voice was cold. At the same time it reached Zhao Chong's mind, it made the man shiver even more, and his fear grew. As he shivered, he knelt down and started kowtowing repeatedly. Xianxia, please spare me. Please, spare me. I know my mistakes now. I didn't manage to recognize you earlier. It was entirely my mistake. As long as you don't kill me, then I'm willing to serve you. Xianxia, please spare me. Chapter 604, 10,000 Evil Ghost Dao. At the instant Zhao Chong knelt down and begged for mercy, fire suddenly erupted from his body. The power from the flames instantly filled the entire area, and at that moment, he swiftly scattered away. This was not self-destruction. He was simply using the chance he created while begging for mercy to make the other person hesitate, and during that instant, he executed the strongest evil art he had at his disposal, which was used specifically for devouring people. He wanted to forcefully take over this person's mind and destroy his soul. He knew that this person's level of cultivation was higher than his, and he also knew that it would be difficult for him to be released unconditionally in light of what he had done, but he still had some marginal confidence that he could succeed. Almost at the instant his nascent soul dissipated, nearly 100 souls appeared in Su Ming's body, and all of them were letting out shrill roars. They were all souls of disciples who Zhao Chong had devoured in the past. Their souls had already fused together with his nascent soul, and as they scattered outwards, it meant that Zhao Chong was no longer the only one trying to occupy Su Ming's mind. There were nearly 100 souls trying to do so at the same time. This was his so-called chance. Su Ming was waiting precisely for this moment. He had already correctly guessed this person's divine ability and its uses earlier, especially when he saw the dried-up corpses sitting all around the cast cave. They were definitely there not just for decoration. A clue was hidden here, and after a brief analysis, Su Ming was certain that Zhao Chong's cultivation method did not just allow him to absorb his disciples' flesh, essence, and their souls. There was another use to it, and that was the ability to use their souls to control their physical bodies, turning them into puppet-like existences. These puppets might not be powerful, but since Zhao Chong did it, then he definitely had a way to transform their bodies. By the looks of it, Chen Diaxi's soul was definitely still within, and perhaps Su Ming had a chance to save him. If that was not the case, Su Ming would have killed Zhao Chong a long time ago and would not have bothered with such theatrics. At that moment, Zhao Chong was forced into a corner and had scattered all his souls to charge at Su Ming's mind. At that moment, Su Ming's cold chuckles reverberated within all of the souls in his body. Almost at the moment Zhao Chong and the others rushed into his mind, prepared to forcefully assimilate him, a powerful will abruptly descended on them. The strength of that will was like the might of the world itself, like a limitless, raging sea. As for Zhao Chong and his souls, they were ants in that world, lonely boats in that raging sea. Under Su Ming's will, the souls that had spread out from Zhao Chong's nascent soul started dissipating one by one. They had been extracted from their bodies for many years, and their lives were now connected to Zhao Chong's. However, There was one soul that was surrounded by a gentle ray of light and disappeared from the list of those that would have to die. What was happening in Su Ming's mind did not cause much of a ruckus, but if souls died in his mind, they would also die in the world outside him. Su Ming's will was the strongest force in his body. Under his suppression, all forms of resistance crumbled, including Zhao Chong's. As he screamed in a shrill voice, his nascent soul shattered, and he disappeared completely. The instant that happened, trails of incredibly pure power that belonged to a nascent soul appeared in Su Ming's mind. The purity of this power was what Zhao Chong had obtained after devouring countless souls for many years, and it was what he had stored in his nascent soul to prepare himself to break into the next realm. Yet at that moment, when he died, the power spread into Su Ming's mind and was absorbed by his nascent divinity, causing it to begin recovering rapidly. 5/10 of his cultivation base had recovered previously, and that was inclusive of his nascent divinity, who was halfway to complete recovery. At that moment, once he absorbed the power of Zhao Chong's nascent soul, that pure power and the aura from the world caused the nascent divinity to recover a little more. Even Su Ming's berserker bones had showed signs of slight recovery after absorbing Zhao Chong's life force. It caused the recovered cultivation base to rise from 5/10 to 6/10. Time passed slowly without Su Ming's notice, as he remained in the karst cave. In the blink of an eye, several days had already gone by. Su Ming sat in the cave and quietly meditated. When another evening went by, he opened his eyes. A brilliant flash appeared in his eyes, and he breathed out a puff of putrid air. His face was calm, and once he cast a glance at his surroundings, his gaze fell on Chen Dexi's body, who was sitting not too far away from him. The physical body was still complete, though on the thinner side, but had very little life force left. It was also an empty shell that was void of a soul. If Su Ming's arrival had not caused Zhao Chong to feel extremely pained at the loss of his medicinal cause, which led to him growing extremely resentful, to the point that he hastened his plan to devour Su Ming, then a few months later, Chen Dexi would have become the same as all his senior brothers. However, Su Ming's arrival had caused Zhao Chong's plans to change. He could no longer care about absorbing Chen Dexi first, which was the reason why the youth had a chance to be revived. As Su Ming looked at Chen Dexi, ugly little thing's adorable smile appeared in his mind. He swiftly lifted his right hand, and a gentle ray of light gradually started spreading out from his palm. A dazed soul could be seen within it. That soul looked just like Chen Dexi. This was the young man's soul. Before Su Ming destroyed Zhao Chong, he had found Chen Dexi among the numerous souls and used his nascent divinity to envelop it, preventing his death when Zhao Chong was destroyed. As Su Ming looked at this soul, he sighed quietly in his heart. There was not much life force left within the soul, and it was the same for his physical body. Even if he fused Chen Dexi's soul with his body and the youth managed to wake up, he would not be able to live past 10 years. Su Ming lifted his right hand and pushed forward. Immediately, that gentle light pushed Chen Dexi's phased soul back into his body. Right at the instant before it fused, the youth no longer remained dazed, but snapped awake. He turned around, as if he wanted to cast a glance at Su Ming, but before he managed to see him clearly, he had already fused with his body. You were originally dead. The only thing I can do is to help you gain 10 years of your life. Use these 10 years to accompany your parents and your little sister. Su Ming's voice reverberated in the karst cave, falling into Chen Dexi's mind. However, the youth was unconscious at that moment. His soul was slowly fusing back into his body. Su Ming stood up and looked at the dried-up corpses beside him. Then, in silence, he waved his arm at them. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. You died in Zhao Chong's hands, but your bodies are still trapped here. I'm not a kind person, but I'll help you. As Su Ming whispered softly, a gust of wind stirred up in the cave and blew gently outwards. Wherever that wind went by, all the corpses would turn into ashes before fusing with the wind and traveling into the deeper parts of the karst cave. Su Ming did not know whether it was just a figment of his imagination, but when the corpses turned into ashes, perhaps it was because of their bodies being transformed, but the empty expressions on their faces seemed to have showed release before they disintegrated. Su Ming remained silent for a moment, then took a step forward and walked towards the deeper parts of the karst cave, where the ashes traveled. The karst cave was built in the shape of a gourd. When Su Ming reached the other end, he saw an old man in black sitting cross-legged over there. His body was dried up and thin, and there was not a hint of life within him. He was dead. The ashes from the corpses had already floated to this place and were falling on that old man's corpse layer by layer, as if they wanted to bury the old man underneath. Perhaps these corpses that had existed for years contained some corrosive power, but as they fell on it, layer by layer, they also caused the old man's body to slowly show signs of decay. A deep wave of hatred spread out from the falling ashes. Su Ming watched silently. He could already guess that this old man was Zhao Chong's original body, and the disciples he killed might no longer have any souls, but the grudge they felt before they died had made them determined to kill and destroy their master before they disappeared. As Su Ming looked the corpse gradually rotting away before it eventually disappeared from his sight, a sentimental feeling rose in his heart. He turned around and left the place. Once he returned to where he was, Su Ming lifted his right hand and pointed towards the unconscious Chen Shi. Immediately, his body flew towards him, and once he held him under his arm, he walked forward, heading towards one of the runes not too far away. Su Ming lowered his head and cast a few looks at it. When he stepped on it, the light of relocation shone from the rune, and in the next instant, it disappeared, along with Su Ming and Chen Shi. Dusk was over, but the sky was not completely dark above the mountain of evil spirit sect just yet. Indistinct figures could still be seen on the ground. A dim light shone from the middle house among the three houses in Zhao Chong's courtyard, and Su Ming walked out from it with Chen Shi under his arm. Once he stepped off the relocation rune, he turned his head around and cast a glance at his surroundings. He fell silent for a moment, then took off the storage bag and some of the other miscellaneous items from Chen Shi's body. Once that was done, he had his body gradually turn into a layer of black fog. As it surrounded him, it caused his body to become obscure. With this, Su Ming looked no different from how Zhao Chong looked previously. At the instant Su Ming absorbed the man's nascent soul, he also saw quite a bit of his memories. From them, he learned that Zhao Chong was practicing an art called 10,000 Evil Ghost Dao. This art was incredibly sinister, but once someone mastered it, its might was nothing to scoff at. However, for some unknown reason, it was incredibly difficult for the practitioners of this art to reach complete mastery. Usually, they would mysteriously die when they were halfway through. It was also pure coincidence that Zhao Chong obtained this art. The cast cave was not his creation, but had existed since the start. Once he stumbled upon it, he found the cultivation method for this evil art within the cave. From then on, he started practicing it in secret. This person might be a sect elder in evil spirit sect, but his status wasn't high. Besides, once he started practicing this art, he was unwilling to mingle around with other people. His death should not catch too much attention. Su Ming originally had the idea of turning into Zhao Chong, but after a period of pensive silence, he shook his head. He was a nascent soul cultivator equivalent to a berserker in the initial stage of the berserker soul stage. Even if he was a berserker who had switched to train in evil arts and his death wouldn't capture too much attention, there should still be someone who would come up and investigate this. A flash of light appeared in Su Ming's right hand and covered Chen Shi's body. Immediately, it disappeared. After a moment of thought, he turned around and stepped into the rune once again. Chapter 605, Investigation. After a moment, Su Ming walked out and crouched down. With his eyes sparkling, he started rearranging the relocation rune to fit the structure of the one he had inherited from Hong Luo. Once he wiped away the traces on top, he walked out of the house without any expression on his face. After a moment of pensive silence, a freezing glint shone in his eyes, and he left the courtyard. He had by then recovered a 6/10 of his cultivation base, and he could do many things that he previously could not. It did not matter whether it was about wiping away the clues of his identity, which he left at the gate where the sacred python was, or about the uncertainties and doubts in Zhong Ren and Zhuo Xingzhen's hearts. Before long, Su Ming returned with a calm expression on his face. He went back to his room and lay down on his bed. He closed his eyes and started taking a catnap. In the upper region of the mountain that belonged to the inner sect of Evil Spirit Sect was a huge hall that towered into the clouds. It was black, just like the other buildings, and filled with a ghastly feeling. Within the hall were two old men, and their facial colors were gray, causing them to look incredibly sickly. They did not move, and even when they breathed, no movement of their chests could be detected. Behind them was a gigantic statue. It was incredibly big, carved in the image of a man wearing a ghost-patterned robe. This man seemed to be middle-aged, and there were numerous ferocious ghost faces embroidered on his robe. He was stepping on a huge python, and it was hissing while having most of its body wrapped around the man. In the man's right hand was a shield, and there was an innumerable amount of vengeful souls stretching out from it. Each of the faces could be seen clearly, and all of them gave off a forlorn air. A wicked air surrounded that statue, but right on top of it was a black lotus, and sitting on it was a woman. She had a dignified expression on her face, and was incredibly beautiful. There was even a holy air about her. Holiness and wickedness. These two completely different presences fused together on the statue, and all those who saw it for the first time would find that there was something strange about it. There were several bells hanging off the python under the man's feet. When there was no wind blowing, there would be no sound, but at that moment, right at the instant Zhao Chong died, one of the many bells started moving on its own, and let out a clear bell chime even without wind. The sound started without warning, and it rang clearly through the quiet hall. Then, as the sound gradually spread, the bell shattered with a crack and fell to the ground. At that moment, the two old men, who were sitting so still in the hall that they seemed like corpses, slowly opened their eyes. They were calm as they looked at the shattered bell on the ground. This origin bell is half black. It's from a berserker who changed to practice the evil arts. One of the old men averted his gaze after casting a glance at that bell before he spoke hoarsely. When his voice reverberated through the quiet hall, dark flames immediately lit up all around them within the originally dark hall, causing light and darkness to begin crisscrossing with each other as those dark flames swayed in the hall. The other old man let his eyelids fall slightly. After a moment, his words tumbled out of his lips slowly. This is Outer Sect's sect elder Zhao Chong's origin bell. Zhao Chong. Is he the person whom the sect secretly baited into practicing the 10,000 evil ghost Tao? I remember that he took in a disciple a few months ago. Investigate this matter. No matter what, we will have to provide a reason if a nascent soul cultivator died within the sect. There seemed to be a lack of harmony between these two old men as they spoke. It was as if they were both giving each other irrelevant answers, as if their final few sentences were not actually directed at each other. Once they finished speaking, two indistinct figures appeared out of nowhere behind the two old men. Once they bowed towards them, they turned around and left the hall. When the two indistinct figures left, the dark light in the hall faded away, and the hall returned to its silent darkness once again, and no bell chimes could be heard any longer. The two old men also closed their eyes. As for Su Ming, at the instant he returned to his room and lay down for a nap, a faint light shone behind his shut eyelids. He might have recovered a 6/10 of his cultivation base, but it would still be to his benefit if he did not reveal himself, because this place was incredibly suitable for him to recover his cultivation base. Besides, Su Ming had a greater goal in mind. If he could restore himself to the peak of his condition, then he was prepared to use this place and its dense power of the world to help him break into the Berserker Soul realm. If he let this place slip out of his hands, then it would be incredibly difficult for him to find another one where the power of the world would be this thick. He had never tried reaching the Berserker Soul realm, but his master had mentioned a few things multiple times when he was still in the 9th summit. He had to search for a place with enough aura to support himself when he was trying to reach a breakthrough into the Berserker Soul realm, or else, it would be a high chance that he would end up failing halfway through. Su Ming knew that it would be incredibly difficult for him to try and reach the Berserker Soul realm. After all his bones in his body were Berserker bones. If that was the case, he had to find an ample supply of the power of the world for him to absorb, and this place was the most suitable. That was why he did not want to expose himself unless it was absolutely necessary. At that moment, the light in his eyes disappeared. He could sense two figures appearing in the courtyard right outside his house. These two people's level of cultivation was slightly higher than that of Zhao Chong. They might not have reached the level equivalent to the middle stage of the Berserker Soul realm, but they were already infinitesimally close to it. There are a lot more powerful warriors in Eastern Wastelands compared to South Morning, especially since the Immortals descended to this place. This is the key reason why the number of powerful warriors in Eastern Wastelands is so much greater than South Morning. Su Ming did not even move a finger, just closed his eyes and slept. Once he sensed the two figures appearing in the courtyard, they charged straight towards Zhao Chong's house, stepped through his door, and moved into his room. When Su Ming saw this, he smiled coldly in his heart. The whole reason behind why he went to the cast cave a second time was so that he could prepare for everything that was going to happen at this moment. He could sense the two figures disappearing from Zhao Chong's house, a clear sign that they had been relocated into the cast cave. After the time taken for an incense stick to burn, they reappeared. They did not immediately leave after rushing out of Zhao Chong's house, but instead went to Su Ming's house. He was pretending to be asleep and his breathing was even, as if he was completely unaware of what was happening, but he had his divine sense faintly spread out. If anything happened, he would be able to determine whether he should take action. The two people phased through the walls of Su Ming's room, and when they floated inside room, one of them smiled coldly and lifted his right hand, going straight for Su Ming's throat. The other person's eyes sparkled as he kept his eyes glued to Su Ming's body, to observe each and every single one of his actions. All of this might have seemed to have happened slowly and over a long period of time, but in truth, only a moment had gone by since the two figures stepped into Su Ming's room to the moment they struck. As of then, one of the figure's fingers were about to touch Su Ming's throat. He shuddered, as if the sudden cold air had chilled him in his sleep. He turned his head around, and his eyelashes fluttered, as if he was about to open his eyes. It did not matter whether it was his expression or his behavior, all of them looked incredibly real, making it seem as if he was a real teenager, about 12 or 13 years of age. However, there was killing intent hidden within his heart. If these two people were just testing him, he would let them go, but if they wanted to kill him, then he might really have to attack. Yet at the moment his eyelashes fluttered and it looked as if he was about to open his eyes. The person's index finger froze, and when Su Ming opened his eyes, the person was already gone with his companion. A glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes and he no longer bothered himself with them. He closed his eyes and continued taking his nap. Soon after, the two figures who had tested Su Ming just moments ago appeared behind the two old men within the Black and Quiet Hall, which was located at the top of the mountain belonging to Evil Spirit Sect. However, the two had blended together with the darkness, and no one could see them clearly. All the dried corpses of Zhao Chong's disciples, which he had absorbed previously in his cast cave, have turned into ashes and buried his original body. His storage bag is still around, and all his other items are also present. Not a single thing is missing. There are no traces of anyone else in the cast cave. There isn't any sign of anyone fighting or casting any arts in there. From the condition of the relocation rune, we were able to tell that it was only activated once before us. Someone went in, but no one came out. We've also investigated the disciple Zhao Chong received 8 months ago. This child is just a mortal and is a bit of a loner. He did not show any signs of venturing out of his room during the past 8 months, but he had an abundance of life force within him. We've asked the disciples who brought this child to the mountain. Their reports are normal, and they didn't find anything strange about him, nor did they suspect anything about the child. We've also asked the sacred python of the outer sect's mountain gate. It does not have a deep impression of this child. We've also investigated the strange behavior of the vengeful souls on the mountain trail 8 months ago when this boy went up the mountain. From our investigations, we found that it was due to Shan Hen 1 acting on his duty and feeding them that day. The two figures spoke one after another. Their voices were cool, and they did not add a single thought of their own. They only reported what they had discovered, because it was not part of what their duty to make any sort of judgments. The hall was silent. After a long while, an old voice spoke up. It's normal that is overflowing with life force. Zhao Chong must have given the child a lot of soul-nurturing cause. The dried corpses disintegrated into ashes to bury Zhao Chong's body. Looks like this is the karma that all those who practice 10,000 evil ghost Dao have to suffer. This should have nothing to do with the boy. Have him go to Conscience Interrogation Hall to receive an interrogation. If there is indeed nothing wrong with him, then don't bother with him anymore. Even if there is nothing wrong with the child, he cannot stay in the outer sect. Have him placed in the laborer's lounge. This matter is dismissed. The old voices in the hall ended the investigation of incidents brought by Zhao Chong's death, and the hall slowly returned to silence. When the next morning arrived, Su Ming was summoned by an expressionless outer sect disciple and brought to a spacious region near the inner sect of Evil Spirit Sect. There was a double-story building there. Once the outer sect disciple delivered Su Ming to this place, he turned around and left. "Come in." A woman's cold and detached voice came from the double-story building.